from Mississippi.
Are we in a quorum call?
We are not.
Thank you. Mr. President, I join my colleagues today in calling on this body to include the Prescription Drug Pricing Reduction Act of 2020 in the next coronavirus relief bill so that we can finally address the high cost of prescription drugs. The troubles caused by skyrocketing drug prices are a never-ending source of worry and hardship for Mississippians and people across this entire country. I hear about this issue from constituents more than just about any other issue when I go home. I hear this all the time. I go to church with people who have to decide if they're going to buy their drugs or if they're going to buy food. That is a reality that we live with. Let me highlight a few stories shared with me by some of my constituents. Emily Quinn lives in Fulton, Mississippi. Her husband, Brian, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 2 and continues to rely on insulin daily. Her son, Dylan, who is now 16, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 6. The Quinn family pays more than $2,700 each month for just Brian and Dylan's insulin, not including other diabetic equipment and supplies that they have to have. It is shocking that more than a century, not a decade, a century, 100 years after insulin was discovered, insulin prices continue to rise by staggering amounts, nearly 300% over the last 10 years. Scott Crawford of Jackson, Mississippi, is a volunteer advocate for multiple sclerosis. Scott was diagnosed with primary progressive MS in 2002. Only one drug, named Ocrevus, can help slow the advancement of this disabling disease. That drug cost a staggering $65,000 a year, more than most Mississippians make. Even with good insurance coverage, Scott cannot afford the $15,000 copay for Ocrevus, so he just goes without. MS drugs have seen some of the most shocking price increases of all, with list prices rising nearly 450% over the last 10 years. 2 young neurologists in Mississippi told me about their Medicare patients who quickly move into catastrophic phase Medicare Part D early in the year. Even though these patients face only a 5% out-of-pocket cost for their drugs in this phase, that small percentage can amount to thousands of dollars for the expensive neurology drugs these patients depend on. Because there is currently no Medicare Part D out-of-pocket cap, these patients will get no relief from high drug prices later in the year when they still have to have them. These are just 2 of many stories that I've received from Mississippians, as I have one of my own as well. My mother, a Medicare beneficiary living in Monticello, Mississippi, Hyde, Lorraine, faced $454.50 right there, out-of-pocket cost for her prescription eye drops earlier this year. A tiny bottle of eye drops, $454.50. The drug, Restasis, has been on the market well over a decade, more than enough time for Allergan, the pharmaceutical company that developed the drug, to recoup its investment. Yet the average wholesale price of this drug has increased almost 250% in 10 years. Almost unbelievable when my mom called me and told me what she paid for eye drops. This case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court because Allergan had undertaken what I consider one of the most blatantly anti-competitive schemes in the history of pharmaceutical industry. Fearing competition after its Restasis patent expired in 2014, Allergan transferred the patents to a Native American tribe in an attempt to use the tribe's sovereign immunity to shield Allergan against competition from lower-priced generic alternatives. As I said, this case went all the way to the Supreme Court in 2018. Even though the Supreme Court ultimately ruled this scheme was illegal, the company's underhanded ploy successfully delayed competition while it continued to reap outrageous benefits from Restation, costing the U.S. healthcare system over $2 billion per year because of their monopoly pricing. Mr. President, we want pharmaceutical companies to succeed. The great cures and treatments they discover improve the lives of many, many Americans. We recognize that fact. But these cures and therapeutics can only save lives if the patients can afford them. And too many Mississippians and individuals across this country cannot afford their prescription drugs due to the anti-competitive prices of companies like Allergan that continue to increase their prices year after year. Today, the threat of the coronavirus pandemic has only increased concerns about drug pricing. As new vaccines and treatments for COVID-19 are being tested and developed, the affordability of prescription drugs is more important than ever. Just as much as we need a vaccine or treatment to be discovered, we also need it to be affordable to Americans if we are going to get on the other side of this pandemic. I am proud to be an original co-sponsor of the Finance Committee Chairman's Comprehensive Prescription Drug Pricing Reduction Act to bring affordability and fairness to the prescription drug market. This bill must be an immediate priority for us as leaders if we are serious. If we're serious about helping patients afford the drugs that they need. This important legislation would create a true out-of-pocket cap for Medicare beneficiaries, reinforce the market forces that have supported the research and developed so many miracle cures, keep pharmaceutical companies from price gouging, prevent taxpayers from being on the hook for unlimited price hikes that have no basis in the free market, stop the hurtful tactics of pharmacy benefit managers that hurt patients and community pharmacies while enriching the middlemen. These reforms would reduce out-of-pocket spending on prescription drugs by $72 billion, reduce premiums by $1 billion, and save taxpayers $95 billion. And the Congressional Budget Office anticipates those savings will spill over even to more savings in the commercial health market. This is a priority that should transcend party politics. Yet Democrats who had previously supported Chairman Grassley's reform legislation have walked away from the drug pricing negotiation table altogether. They would rather deny President Trump a victory on this issue than help the millions of Americans struggling to make ends meet due to high drug cost. There is no doubt about it. They are putting election year politics ahead of making prescription drugs affordable for the American people. Mr. President, the American people can't wait. Every month this continues to block this vital legislation is another month of thousands of dollars in insulin expenses for the Quinn family in Fulton, Mississippi. Every month delays is another month that Scott Crawford's MS advances because he cannot afford his medications. Every month is another month that those neurologists in Jackson will continue to worry about their patients on Medicare who face unlimited expenses due to no out-of-pocket cap. These patients and millions more like them cannot wait until next year or until the coronavirus epidemic passes or until Democrats decide to put the American people over politics. Mississippians and Americans need a solution now. My friend, the senator from Iowa, has done the hard work of writing a bill over the past 18 months that can address the heart of the issue and garner bipartisan consensus. I call on my colleagues to include the Prescription Drug Pricing Reduction Act in the next coronavirus relief package. I've been very excited to work on this. This is one of the very reasons that I came to Washington, D.C., is to help Mississippians. Mr. President, I yield the floor.